I'm Sherry Kendall, and welcome to Hometown Salutes. Today, I have a very special guest, Fayette County veteran Mary Griffin. Welcome, Mary, to the show.
Well, thank you, Sherry.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you decide to go into the Navy?
I was out of high school 2 years, and
You graduated from Fayette County?
Fayette County in 1979.
Okay.
And so it was in June of 81. In fact, it was my mom's birthday. My dad came to pick me up to take me out to the house to celebrate my mom's birthday. And he goes, well, we're going to go to the library first. He goes, I got something in there for you. So when we went in, he had a stack of college manuals on a table and said, you pick out whatever school you want to go to, and I'll send it to you, because, Mary, if you stay here, your life is not going to be good. Because I was a normal 70s, 80s person, liked to party and everything. Worked 2 jobs, though, so worked 7 days a week. And next thing I know, 10 days later, I was in Orlando, Florida at boot camp.
Wow. So your parents were supportive?
Oh, gosh, yes.
And your mom was good with that?
Yes. I am one of 6 kids. So I'm number 3, and she still had, my youngest brother is 8 years younger, and my youngest sister is 10 years younger than me. So there was still kids going through grade school at the house, and it was probably best relief. They knew where I was and what I was doing, where living here in Connersville, they never knew where I was or what I was doing.
Yeah,
so
pre-cell phones. And
yes. So, yes, very supportive. My dad was a Navy ROTC through 3 years of his college.
Okay.
And everything. And then his 3rd year, he was out in the Mediterranean in the summer when his father passed away and never got to come home for his father's funeral. So, something I wanted to do. I mean, wanted to do it in a moment's notice. I joined the Navy and don't regret it at all to this day.
So as you're leaving, the day you're leaving, who took you?
Well, actually, I said bye to my parents at their house, and I had a group of my friends take me to Hojo's, Howard Johnson, up in Indianapolis, because the next morning we went to AFES in Indianapolis to board a bus, and they take us to the airport, and we go off. So I had a group of my friends take me up for one last party before I head off to boot camp.
So what's the ratio? How many women versus guys was it all women? It wasn't all women that went, right?
No, but at boot camp in Orlando, the companies consisted of 80 women. I arrived there on June 20th, and it wasn't until like the 26th we had a total of 80 women to be able to make a company, where the men make 2 or 3 companies a day. But it just takes that much longer back in 81 to form a company of 80.
Okay.
And in fact, I was one of the older ones because I was out of high school for 2 years. I think there were 3 other ladies that were older than I was, and everyone else was straight out of high school.
High school into. Okay. So you did basic training where?
Orlando, Florida.
And how long did that last?
Ours lasted 8 weeks.
So is it crazy and tough? And
yes, it is. It's very disciplined. They break you down to make you into a sailor or make you into a GI, and let you find out who's the boss, and you're not the boss anymore. And I think it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, I'd do it again. Boot camp is one of those things that there's no chaos in your life when you're at boot camp. Everything is so structured.
Everything's regimen and...
Yes, I mean, as far as, making your bed, I got in trouble for my pillowcase being off of 1/8 of an inch on one corner.
So it really is like that.
Oh, yes. And then you go to what is called IT intense training for an hour, where you do a V sit-up for an hour without coming down out of it. So, you learn. It's good. You become very physical. your mind is clear again, you know, because otherwise it's full of all this other stuff all the time. We're here, as I said, they break you down to build you what they want you to be.
That's awesome. So did you do specialized training?
Yes, I did. From Orlando, I went to Meridian, Mississippi. It was a naval air station, and that's where the yeoman, I was a yeoman, has their training, and a yeoman is a secretary.
Okay.
And I had been that for 2 years working at the unemployment office. So
Here in town?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So went there, and it was a 6-week course that I finished in 4 days. So
Really?
yes, I tested out of it because I already knew how to type, and that's all you learned was how to type and, you know, file stuff. And I had already been doing that for 2 years. So while I was there at A school, because I tested out so quick, I went over and worked in the legal department, which was fun. I really liked that. I did put the flag up every morning and took the flag down every night, and for the next 3 weeks until I got my orders, and my orders came through that I was going to Seoul, Korea.
Wow.
Yes. And this is a good part of the story. 3 months before I even thought about going into the Navy, me and one of the girls that I worked with at the employment office went to see a fortune teller here in town.
Yeah.
And the fortune teller told me that I would travel a long distance and meet a man in uniform within the next 12 months. So I went to Korea, and that's where I met my husband, who was in the Army.
Okay.
My first husband, yes.
Wow. So it came true.
Yes, it did.
So, I mean, being in the Navy as a woman, did the guys treat you right? Like, were you around them?
We don't get treated any different.
They looked at you the same way?
Yeah,
You were just
no,
one of the guys.
I mean, and that's what being a GI is. It's a government issue. And being in the military, you are no different than the next. And everyone is treated the same. And you can't expect, just because I'm a woman and I'm petite and all that stuff, no, that's not what it's all about. I mean, even when I went in, you know, Navy women weren't on ships or anything yet. So, I mean, of course, we did most of the land duties that there was on land and stuff, but no, it's no different. I mean, the perfect example was when I was in Korea. I was an E1 when I went over there and had just made E3 when I was coming back to the States. But the whole time I was there, I did all the grunt work. So I drove the Jeep or the van all around Seoul. Then even an hour south to Yonsan Air Force Base. Had to drive down there and pick people up, if new people that were arriving. And at that time, I was 20 years old.
Sure.
20 years old and weighed probably about 105 pounds in a Navy uniform. And there was only 7 Navy women in all of Korea out of the 40,000 U.S. troops that were there.
7?
7 Navy women. And we all were stationed on the same base in Yonsan, Korea, which is part of Seoul.
Okay. So tell us about Seoul. I mean,
It's a woman's paradise.
have you been back?
No, I would love to go back. I visit Yonsan, and then it's called Itaewon with the Google Maps guy.
Oh, yeah.
It was different because back then, I mean, there was still active. I mean, there's still to this day active fighting up on the DMZ because they've never, you know, they've never done a truce or anything. It's just they still shoot at each other all the time up there. Seoul itself is beautiful, big. Very big. When I arrived there were already 13 million people.
Shoo.
in Seoul, and that's a lot of people when you grow up in a little town like Connersville. And my first flight on an airplane was to Orlando, and then
So you did your first of a lot of things by
yes,
joining the service.
Yes, it was where I was stationed at. I worked with a bunch of officers from all the different branches of service because I was tied to United Nations Command and Joint Service Command, and it was run by the Air Force at the time. So I worked for an Air Force colonel, and I was the age of his kids. So he and his wife, more or less, took me and some of my girlfriends from over there, and they'd have dinners for us.
Aw.
And everything to make us feel at home because they knew how hard it was for us girls. I really liked my job just because I got to travel around and see stuff. I worked with a lot of Vietnam vets that they would always make sure when a new one would come in to my duty station, they'd always seem like they had to put me in my place. That wasn't fun, as they thought that just because I was a woman that I'd try to use being a woman as for different things.
Right.
And, being late to work, not coming into work, and I was like, no, I'm sorry, you have the wrong person here.
Right.
So, but I learned a lot about respect because those Vietnam vets went through a lot, and I was never going to see that because I was in during peaceful times.
Right. Right. So what was a typical day like for you then? I mean, did you start early in the morning and
I
do
worked
stuff?
a 8 to 5 job Monday
Oh,
through
you did?
Friday.
Nice.
Now there was times that I would have to work, like when we would do war games or something over there. I would have to go into a bunker or go out into the field with the Army people, for 2 weeks. But it was nothing. It was sleeping in a tent and showering in a shower out in a tent. But if you camp, you already know how to do all that stuff.
Right. So were you with other women at the time?
No, I worked with mainly all men. There wasn't very many. There were a few Army women, but I never worked side by side with them.
Okay.
But even when I went out in the field, I wouldn't. They'd house me with the officers instead of the enlisted. I don't know why, but so the Navy, we did get a little better treatment, I think.
Yeah. Wow. So where else did you go?
After my 12 months in Korea, I got.
You were 12 months?
12 months, yes. Oh, yes. I went over there with one suitcase and came back with 500 pounds worth of clothes. Yeah. And it was stationed in Washington, D.C. at the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence College. And what that was is that's where they train attachés for embassies. So it was a college. It was a 4-year college that people that had been in the government and worked their way up through intelligence and stuff. If they were chosen to become an attaché, they'd have to do a 4-year school there. And I typed in a typing pool, me and 2 other people, for 60 officers.
Wow.
And so that's what I did Monday through Friday again, from 8 to 5. No weekends, no drills, no guard duty. I mean, I had an easy life in the Navy.
Yeah.
I'm thankful. And D.C., I really liked D.C. That's where I was stationed with my husband there. He got out of the Army and came with me to D.C.
So you met him?
I met him in Korea.
Oh, you did?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes. He was from Missouri.
Okay.
So, yeah, really liked it. Did my remaining 18 months in Washington, D.C., and then I got out of active duty and went into active reserves, and we moved then to Missouri.
Okay.
And then I did 2 years of active reserves.
So at some point that we talked, when did you go, like you were in North Korea at some point.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
Okay. When I got nominated for a USO 5-star tour by the officers that I worked with. And so we got it. It was a tour that took us all around Seoul. It lasted 3 days, taking us to the different palaces and gardens and everything. And one part of that tour was taking us up to Panmunjom, which is up at the DMZ at North Korea, United Nations Command that's up there. And they take you into the building that is there, and it's just a long, narrow building with, you know, chairs on this side and chairs on this side, and a cord that has the microphones coming off of it down the center. And so at one point you can step over to North Korea, and the guards are standing there with their guns, you know, and you step over there, you get your picture taken, and then you step back, and then they allow you then to go outside and step across the line into North Korea, have your picture taken, go back. But they say as long as you're standing there looking at them, there's a building over there, and they said they're taking pictures of you constantly there. So they have you take off your name tag when you go. So your name tag isn't shown.
Wow.
And everything. But yeah, that's kind of eerie because knowing that, you know, maybe, you know, 50 miles, 100 miles away, they're still having war games, playing real war with each other out there. The ROK soldiers, Republic of Korea, the South Koreans, and the Army and the Marines against the North Koreans. Yeah, so that was quite an experience because,
Sure.
yeah, there's I forget the name of the city, but about 5 miles out, there's a village that you can see. They would bus people into it. This is part of the tour. They tell you all this. They bus people in there to work and all that stuff. So, because we can take pictures, you know, that far away and see people working, but at the end of the day, they bus everyone out. So it's just a fake village there for show.
Wow. And that was a 3-day experience?
Yes, going all around Seoul to the different palaces and the gardens, which, you know, they're just as beautiful as what you see.
I was going to say, are they just beautiful? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so. No, that was a very good experience to be able to go there and be around people with, you know, with their rifles and.
So what language? Do they speak English?
Well, are you talking about in Korea?
Yeah.
They are actually been taught English from the time, you know, when we were over there for the Korean War. So they started teaching English in kindergarten to them in the 60s.
Oh, they did?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they all know English. So they know what you're saying. Now, how well they can speak it back to you, that's like with anything. I mean, you can know by listening what it is, but if you can verbalize it back. So, yeah, they all know what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's when you go to haggle for prices and stuff, you know, they try to not act like they know what you're saying, but they do.
So is there any, was there any scary experience or?
Now when I was over there, and this is quite common, probably isn't anymore. We used to, if you were out late walking in from the village and everything, there would be pamphlets and flyers dropping from the sky, and it's just North Korea propaganda, and it's in Korean, so we never knew what it said. But we would collect them up and turn them in because they would fall. The weather balloons, they know exactly when for them to release and drop. and everything, and it was always over Yonsan, which was the base I was stationed at. So, because it had both all of the American Armed Forces on it, they had United Nations Command. So you had your British, your Australians, your Gurkhas, which were from Nepal.
All right there on the
Scots.
same.
We're all on the same base and everything. So, and then we had housing with the Koreans too. So in the naval house that I was in, there was 10 Koreans down on one as 7 girls, and then there were the Navy guys stationed in there. So we all shared one barracks over there.
And they treated you fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they were just another person.
Wow. So, what are some life lessons that you've learned from your time in the military?
Respect your elders, or respect your peers. Try to do stuff right the first time. If not, always try to do your best. Always be on time.
Were you never not on time? And what would happen?
No, I mean, I didn't want to experience I hated it that my pillow was off 1/8 of an inch at one time, because it's just, and, you learn by your mistakes. Don't repeatedly do the same mistake over and over, because, someone's taken time to teach you something, you better learn it.
Right.
And that's just how it is. And being one of 6 kids, my mom ran a strict house.
So were they ever able to come visit you?
No, they didn't. No. When back then there wasn't any phones. I had to talk to my parents on my mom's birthday. So I was over there for like 7 months, and then I talked to them a week before I came home. Those are the only 2 phone calls that I was able to make. But I did, while I was stationed in Korea, I got a letter from my mom every day.
Oh, really?
She wrote me every day.
Wow. So did you keep the letters?
I have them somewhere. I have no idea where, but yes, and
there's not many handwritten letters in today's times.
No,
so
and there was articles about, Connorsville. She'd send me clippings from the newspapers, and she was a big sports fan, so there was always something about the Reds or the Spartans or something.
So today, are you able to keep in touch with your military friends?
I do not have any connections with any of them that I was stationed with there. And when I was stationed in D.C., there was just the 2 of us, me and 2 other people in the office. One girl was from Britain, so she went back there, and then OC, the sergeant that ran our office, he retired while I was stationed there, and you see, so I just never have. Now, the people that I went to reserves with in Missouri, I kept in touch with them even though I got out.
Okay. So what was that like, the reserves in Missouri? What actually?
I was stationed. I lived in Sedalia, which is an hour out of Kansas City, and I was attached. My command there was attached to a NATO command. Oh. So that was fun. We did do quite a bit of travel. Traveled out to California a couple times on a weekend, or went up to Nebraska, went out to Norfolk, and then I did a 2-week active duty in Lisbon, Portugal.
Wow.
Which is the resort town of Cascais, and that's where the United Nations Command was, right on the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. So and the resort town of Cascais was adjacent to it. So that's where they housed us. And I just happened to be over there when Reagan bombed Tripoli.
Really?
Yes, and that was scary.
I was going to say, how was that?
It was scary because my oldest child at that time was just 18 months, not quite 18 months old. And wasn't pregnant with my second child yet, but I was like, what am I doing here, you know? Because I was on duty with a bunch of British officers, being NATO, as whoever you got stationed with. And I got up for go to breakfast one morning, and they were like, "Oh, Mary, what did your boyfriend do last night?" And I'm like, my boyfriend? I don't have a boyfriend. I'm married. And they said, "Oh, Ronnie, baby." And I'm like, "Ronnie who?" "Ronald Reagan." And I'm like, "Why? What did he do?" And they said, "Oh, he bombed Tripoli last night." So we hate to tell you, you're going to have to stay here another week. So my 2-week active duty ended up being a 3-week active duty. And they told me not to talk while I was out in the village. They all speak English, but they speak British English. And so I was like, well, you can just look at me and tell me I look American compared to everyone else. So, yeah, that was hard.
Yeah, probably really intense. I mean,
yeah, because then, you know, when I flew into Portugal, you know, you just went into the airport and all that stuff. Well, by the time I was leaving, there were armed guards everywhere and stuff, and it was like, okay, I've had enough, so I didn't re-enlist.
Okay, so you did 4 years?
I did 3 years of active duty and 2 years of active reserve, so I did 5 years.
5 years. Wow. So what'd you do after the service?
Did
you come back here?
No, we did not. We lived in Missouri for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
Raised our family there. Then my dad was part owner in a company and offered my husband a job in Indianapolis. And in 2000, we moved to Indy. And that whole time, I worked in offices. I worked in a Levi Strauss plant.
Oh, wow.
Sewed Levi's for 9 years, and then went to work in the office and stayed there until the plant closed. And then in Indy, I worked for fire sprinkler companies.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My 2 big jobs that I had the whole time I was up there was fire sprinkler.
Wow.
And now I'm back home.
And you're glad to be home, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Very much so. I mean, found the love of my life, Jeff. And
newlywed? That's awesome.
Yes. So.
Well, that's great. Well, Mary, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming and sharing your experience today with us. I want to thank you for your service and your sacrifice. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That you did that. So be sure to tune in next month for another edition of Hometown Salutes.